The gavel struck, and the courtroom hushed into uneasy silence as Ethan Cole entered, his briefcase dangling like a forgotten weight. He had walked in expecting routine paperwork, not the avalanche waiting to crush him. Judge Eleanor Brooks adjusted her glasses, her voice steady yet cold as she announced that a child bore his name, his blood. Ethan's chest tightened, his ears filled with a baby's sudden cry piercing the stillness, echoing through oak-paneled walls like a haunting trumpet. He whispered, "This can't be right," his words drowned in disbelief. Faces in the crowd twisted with curiosity, judgment, pity. The nurse, Tessa Nguyen, stepped forward, carrying a fragile bundle swaddled in white, her eyes avoiding his. Ethan's hand trembled as the weight of destiny was placed before him, small fingers curling in blind innocence. His throat closed, denial rising, yet a whisper broke free. "Why me?" The walls pressed closer, the air felt heavy, and his world collapsed into that tiny cry that refused to end. The hallway outside the courtroom stretched endlessly, Ethan's footsteps hollow against the marble. His heart thundered with each beat as whispers of strangers echoed behind him. Tessa followed, her arms carrying Maya like fragile glass, the child's cries softening but not stopping. Ethan wanted to disappear, but the nurse said quietly, "She needs you." He shook his head, voice cracking. "I never asked for this." The truth pressed down heavier than the ceiling, heavier than the air. He leaned against the cold wall, eyes closing, searching for escape in the silence. But the child's whimper reminded him there was no escape. His life had been handed over in a moment he never chose. Ethan stumbled toward the courthouse exit, his tie loosened, sweat beading along his brow. Outside, sunlight stabbed his eyes, too bright for a man drowning in shadows. The crowd dispersed with hushed tones, but judgment lingered in their stares. A woman near the steps muttered, "He doesn't even look like a father," her words slicing deep. Ethan clenched his jaw, fists tightening, but his voice stayed silent. The nurse waited, rocking Maya, while Ethan stood frozen at the threshold of a new life he never wanted. The car ride was suffocating. Ethan sat in the back seat, shoulders rigid, his eyes locked on the window, where the city blurred past in streaks of light and shadow. Maya's soft cries filled the silence, each sound clawing at his chest. Tessa glanced at him in the mirror, saying nothing, her face unreadable. Ethan finally muttered, "This isn't my life." The words hung heavy, unanswered, while Maya's small fists waved as if to protest his denial. The city moved forward, dragging him unwillingly with it. Ethan stepped into his apartment, the silence deafening. Dust floated in sunlight, breaking through blinds, illuminating a space not meant for children. The nurse placed Maya in his arms, and for the first time he held her fully. His body stiffened, every instinct urging him to let go, but her tiny fingers gripped his shirt. His chest tightened, tears pricking his eyes, though he forced them back. Whispering to the empty room, he said, "I don't know how to do this." The words cracked like glass, the beginning of a life that was never supposed to be his. Ethan sat on the edge of his couch, the apartment dim except for a lamp flickering in the corner. His hands covered his face, muffling a breath that came out jagged and uneven. Maya's soft coos filled the silence, not cries this time, just sounds of innocence unaware of the storm she caused. Tessa stood quietly by the door, watching without judgment, but her silence weighed heavier than words. Ethan whispered, "Why does she feel like both a stranger and a part of me?" The admission cut through the air, fragile yet undeniable. He lifted his head, eyes bloodshot, and stared at the child on the blanket before him. His chest ached with memories of abandonment, the father who left him, the mother who drowned in sorrow. This wasn't just a child in his care, it was the reflection of every scar he had tried to bury. He reached out, fingertips brushing her tiny hand, a wave of fear and connection striking him at once. Morning broke harshly, light cutting through blinds as Ethan stumbled into the kitchen, eyes swollen from sleepless hours. The counter was littered with unopened mail, bills and takeout containers. a picture of his unraveling life. Maya's cries reached him from the next room, pulling him back from the numb haze of exhaustion. He pressed his palms to the countertop, whispering, "I don't even know how to hold her future." The words were raw, bitter, but honest. Tessa entered, her expression steady, placing a small bottle of milk in his hand. "Start here," she said softly, her voice carrying no pity, only quiet insistence. Ethan stared at the bottle as if it were a weapon, heavy with meaning he was unprepared to face. His hand trembled before he exhaled, realizing responsibility had a face, a voice, and a name that could not be ignored. Ethan held Maya awkwardly in his arms, bottle tilted too far, milk spilling over her chin as she squirmed. His frustration boiled, sweat lining his forehead, but her small eyes blinked up at him with trust he didn't deserve. He muttered, "I'm no good at this," his voice nearly cracking. Tessa leaned forward, guiding his hand gently, whispering, "Breathe, let her guide you." Ethan's hand steadied, almost against his will, and for the first time, Maya latched properly, drinking in quiet rhythm. The sound was soft, ordinary, yet it shattered something in him. His throat tightened, tears gathering, though he blinked them away. He whispered again, "She doesn't even know me," but deep down he feared she already did. His brokenness was exposed in that moment, and she seemed to accept it without question. That night, the city hummed outside, but Ethan's world shrank into the quiet room where Maya slept in a borrowed crib. He sat in the dark, staring, haunted by her small breaths. His mind drifted back to his own childhood, the nights spent alone, waiting for a father who never came home. He whispered, "Will I do the same to her?" His words felt like poison on his tongue. The silence that followed was unbearable, as though the walls themselves condemned him. Tessa sat in a chair nearby, arms crossed, eyes steady but not unkind. "She doesn't need perfect," she said firmly. "She needs present." Ethan swallowed hard, his body trembling with the weight of her truth. His chest tightened as if chains had been wrapped around his ribs, and yet for a fleeting second, he wondered if he could break them. Ethan woke from a restless nap on the couch, startled by silence. He rushed to the crib, fearing the worst, only to find Maya staring at him with wide, unblinking eyes. No cries, just quiet watching. His knees gave way as he leaned against the crib's edge, meeting her gaze. "You don't know how much I'm failing you already," he whispered. But Maya's tiny hand reached upward, brushing against his finger, gripping it with surprising strength. A shuddering breath escaped him, his body fighting against the flood of emotions he tried to contain. In that fragile grasp, he felt both his deepest shame and a glimmer of possibility he had never allowed himself before. Tears finally fell, unrestrained, as he whispered, Maybe I can try." Ethan sat at a small cafe table, untouched coffee cooling beside him as his phone buzzed with relentless messages. His sister Laura's words echoed from their last call, sharp and unforgiving. "You can't raise a child, you'll ruin her." Shame burned his chest, heavier than the stares of strangers around him. He wanted to vanish into the noise of clinking cups, but Maya's image on his phone screen wouldn't let him escape. Tessa's voice rang in memory, calm but firm, urging him to stand. He clenched the phone tighter, muttering, "Why do they all see me as broken?" The world outside rushed by, yet he felt caged, suffocated by family expectations he could never meet. His reflection in the cafe window showed hollow eyes that no longer belonged to the man he thought he was. At his office, Ethan walked past glass walls, where co-workers' whispers followed him like shadows. Derek leaned against a cubicle, smirking as he said under his breath, "Single dad? Won't last a week." Laughter rippled behind him, cutting deep. Ethan gritted his teeth, clutching files tighter, but shame pricked his skin. His desk felt smaller than ever, stacked with reports he could no longer focus on. Every tap of the keyboard seemed louder, a reminder of his unraveling. He glanced at a photo of Maya Tessa had slipped in, taped near his screen, her innocent eyes staring back. The contrast between the laughter around him and that fragile image nearly broke him. He whispered, I'll prove them wrong, though his own voice wavered with doubt. Later that evening, Ethan faced Laura in their mother's old house. The living room smelled of memories, dust, and disapproval. Laura stood with arms folded, eyes blazing. "You're reckless, Ethan. That child deserves stability, not your chaos." His fists clenched at his sides, his voice low, trembling. "You don't know what she means to me." Laura's lips twisted in a bitter smile. "You don't even know what she needs." The words pierced him deeper than he admitted. Maya slept in the car seat nearby, oblivious to the storm. Ethan stared at his sister, a mix of anger and desperation flooding him. He wanted to scream, to shatter the silence that smothered him since the courtroom, but all he could whisper was, "She's mine." The phone rang that night, Ethan answering with a voice rough from exhaustion. On the other end, his mother's old friend, Mrs. Howard, wasted no time with greetings. I heard. You think raising a child erases the mess you made?" Her tone dripped with accusation, each word a stone. Ethan pressed the phone harder against his ear, jaw tight, anger boiling. He muttered, "You don't get to define me." But even as he spoke, doubt lingered, heavy as the night around him. Her sigh came sharp, condemning, before the line clicked dead. Alone in the dark, Ethan sank into the couch, the silence unbearable. Maya's soft breathing filled the room, the only sound that tethered him to hope. He whispered into the emptiness, "She's all that matters now." Rain fell hard the next morning as Ethan carried Maya through the streets, his jacket shielding her from the storm. Passers-by stared, whispers lost under the sound of water hammering pavement. His mind replayed every word thrown at him: failure, unfit, broken. His chest burned, but Maya's grip on his shirt anchored him to the present. He muttered through clenched teeth, "They'll see. I'll make them see." His steps grew heavier, shoes soaked, but determination rose with each breath. This fight wasn't just against the world's scorn. It was against every demon he carried within. He glanced down at Maya's tiny face peeking from the folds of the jacket, and for a moment, her innocence silenced the storm inside him. The letter arrived in a plain envelope, slipped under Ethan's door with no return address. His hands shook as he unfolded the paper, words scrawled in uneven ink revealing a truth that knocked the breath from him. "She isn't yours." His chest tightened, denial pushing against the tide of shock. He paced the room, muttering, "No, this is another lie." Tessa's eyes widened when she read the page over his shoulder, her silence heavier than words. Ethan crushed the paper in his fist, the sound deafening in the still apartment. He whispered, "Who would do this?" The past seemed to rise from the walls, voices of betrayal echoing louder than his heartbeat. For the first time, doubt crept in. Was everything built on a lie? Maya's soft coo from her crib cut through his storm, fragile yet grounding, a reminder that the truth would come at a price. Laura sat across from Ethan in the dim corner of a restaurant, her glass of wine untouched. "You don't get it," she whispered sharply. "That baby isn't who you think." Ethan's jaw clenched, his voice shaking. "Then tell me the truth." Laura's eyes flickered with guilt, and her fingers tapped nervously on the table. "I promised I'd protect someone," she admitted. The weight of her words pressed down harder than the noise around them. "Minded wives?" Ethan leaned forward, fury burning behind his eyes. "Protect who? At what cost?" Laura's silence spoke louder than anything, her face torn between confession and loyalty. Maya's name hung unspoken, the tension tightening like a rope. Ethan gripped the table edge, whispering through gritted teeth, "You've been lying to me." Back at his apartment, Ethan confronted Tessa, the weight of Laura's half-truths burning in his chest. "You knew something, didn't you?" he demanded. Tessa froze, her hand tightening on Maya's blanket. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "It wasn't my secret to tell." Anger surged, sharp and unforgiving. "You stood there letting me believe." His words broke under the strain of betrayal. Tessa's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "I thought it was protecting her," she said, voice trembling. Ethan's fists pressed against the wall, knuckles white, his breath ragged. Maya stirred, a soft cry filling the silence like a fragile protest against the storm. Ethan turned, his body heavy with the realization that the truth had been sitting in the shadows all along. The revelation came like a knife. Laura finally admitted it in a voice nearly broken. "Maya isn't yours, Ethan, she's mine." His body stiffened, breath stolen as the words crashed into him. "You lied? All this time?" His voice echoed with disbelief. Laura's eyes brimmed with tears, her hands trembling. "I was scared. I thought you'd never forgive me." Rage and heartbreak tangled inside him, his chest burning. "You gave me a life built on lies," he spat, each word cutting deeper than the last. Laura reached for him, but he stepped back, shaking his head. "You let me believe she was mine, when all along—" His words faltered, broken by the truth that now bound them all in ways no denial could undo. Ethan stood in the rain outside Laura's house, his body trembling with anger and despair. The storm drenched him, yet the fire inside burned hotter. His voice cracked as he shouted into the night, "You stole my truth." Laura's silhouette lingered behind the glass window, watching with sorrow. Ethan pounded his fist against the door, his heart tearing with each strike. Maya's cry carried faintly from inside, the sound stabbing him deeper than any betrayal. He fell to his knees, water soaking his clothes, tears mingling with the rain. His whisper broke the storm's rhythm, fragile and shattering. "She was the only part of me I thought was real." Lightning split the sky above him, illuminating a man broken by truth he never sought, chained to love he could not let go. The courthouse echoed with restless murmurs as Ethan stepped forward, soaked from the storm yet blazing with fury. Laura stood opposite him, her eyes swollen from tears, clutching Maya's carrier tightly. Judge Eleanor raised her gavel, but Ethan's voice thundered before she could speak. "You stole my truth, and you expect me to stay silent?" His words cut through the silence like shattered glass. Laura's lips trembled, her voice breaking. "I did it to protect her." Ethan's fists clenched, veins pulsing as he barked. "Protect her from what? Me?" The crowd gasped, tension thick as smoke. Ethan's heart pounded, his body trembling as he turned toward Maya, the storm in his chest colliding with her calm innocence. His voice softened, breaking apart. "She deserves better than all of this." Ethan's voice shook the walls as he turned on Tessa. "You stood by, knowing everything." His finger pointed like an accusation that pierced deeper than any blade. Tessa's hands trembled as she held Maya's blanket, her eyes pleading. "I thought it was right," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of guilt. Ethan's jaw quivered, his chest rising and falling like waves ready to break. "You let me build my life on lies," he roared, the pain in his tone silencing the gallery. Tears streamed down Tessa's face as she took a step closer, her voice fragile but firm. "But you love her, don't you? That's real. That's all that matters." His breath caught, his fury tangled with truth he couldn't deny. Laura's voice broke through the tension, desperate, raw. "I lied because I was scared, Ethan. I couldn't raise her alone. I thought you were strong enough to give her what I couldn't." Ethan staggered back, shaking his head violently. "You handed me a life I never chose," he rasped, his voice cracking. Laura's tears spilled freely as she cried, "But you became what she needed." The gallery erupted in whispers, the judge hammering her gavel to restore order. Ethan's chest burned with rage, yet his eyes locked on Maya, who stirred with a small cry. His fury crumbled under her innocent gaze, a fragile reminder of what all this pain was for. His whisper cut through the chaos. "She didn't choose this either." The climax erupted when Ethan slammed his fist on the wooden table, voice cracking with raw fury. "Enough! This is not about your lies, or my anger, or anyone's pride. This is about her." The courtroom froze as his trembling finger pointed toward Maya. Tears streamed down his cheeks, unrestrained, his voice collapsing into a sob. She deserves love, not battles. She deserves truth, not scars. Laura covered her mouth, shaking with grief. Tessa's hands pressed against her chest as if holding her heart in place. Judge Eleanor's stern gaze softened, the weight of Ethan's words sinking deeper than law itself. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the choice that would shape everything. The storm of voices finally broke into silence. Ethan stood tall, though trembling, his face raw with tears. He turned to the judge, his voice fragile but unwavering. "I don't know how to be what she needs, but I know I won't abandon her. Not like I was abandoned." The words echoed with finality, sealing his choice. Laura collapsed into her seat, sobs shaking her body. Tessa bowed her head, tears falling in quiet surrender. Judge Eleanor raised her gavel, her tone firm yet softened. "Then you will carry this responsibility." The room exhaled, tension breaking into a quiet storm of emotions. Ethan looked at Maya, her tiny hand waving blindly, and whispered, "You will know me. You will never be alone." The courthouse doors closed behind Ethan as he carried Maya into the fading light of evening. His chest still ached from the words spoken inside, but a strange calm began to replace the storm. Tessa followed, her face marked with quiet exhaustion, yet her eyes held something softer, relief. Ethan stopped on the courthouse steps, his arms tightening protectively around Maya. He whispered to her, "They won't take you from me, not now, not ever." His words trembled, but carried a vow he had never spoken before. The city bustled around him, cars honking, footsteps echoing, but for a moment it all felt distant. Ethan's focus was locked on the fragile weight resting against him, her breath steady against his chest. For the first time, the fear in his heart made room for something else: resolve. Back in his apartment, Ethan placed Maya gently into the crib, her small fingers curling as she drifted into sleep. The silence was no longer suffocating. It felt like fragile peace. Tessa stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her face unreadable. Ethan turned, his voice low but steady. "You stayed when you didn't have to." Tessa's eyes softened, her voice gentle. "I couldn't leave her, or you." Ethan swallowed hard, staring at Maya, his chest heavy with gratitude and regret. He sat beside the crib, his hand resting on the railing, whispering, "I don't know if I can give her everything, but I'll give her what I never had: presence." Tessa's nod carried quiet approval, the moment filling the room with unspoken forgiveness. The next day, Ethan stood at his mother's grave, the ground damp from morning rain. He cradled Maya against his chest, her wide eyes watching the sky above. His voice wavered as he spoke to the stone. "You left me without answers, and I've carried that emptiness all my life. But she won't feel that." The wind brushed through the trees, carrying the scent of wet earth, a whisper of something cleansing. Ethan bowed his head, a tear slipping free. "I'll break the cycle, Mom. I'll give her what I never had." Maya stirred, her tiny hand brushing his collar, as if sealing his vow. The silence that followed no longer felt hollow. It felt like acceptance. Ethan sat with Laura in the quiet of her kitchen, the tension between them thick but softened by exhaustion. She looked broken, her voice barely a whisper. "I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I was saving her." Ethan's jaw tightened, but his voice was calmer than before. "You took my choice away, but what's done is done. She needs both of us now, whether you believe it or not." Laura's tears spilled freely as she reached across the table, her hand trembling. Ethan hesitated before resting his hand over hers, the bitterness not gone, but cracked enough to let something else through. Maya's soft cry from the living room interrupted the moment, reminding them both of the fragile life at the center of their broken bond. That night, Ethan rocked Maya gently in his arms as the apartment glowed with soft lamplight. The day's storms had passed, leaving only the quiet rhythm of her breathing against his chest. His voice was low, a fragile whisper meant only for her. "I can't promise perfection, but I promise presence. I promise you'll never question if you're wanted." His words cracked with emotion, but his hold on her grew steadier with each breath. Tessa sat silently on the couch, watching, her eyes shining with tears, knowing the man before her was no longer the same. Ethan pressed his lips against Maya's forehead, whispering, "You'll always know who I am." The night wrapped around them, heavy with scars, but carrying the fragile glow of hope. The morning sun spilled across Ethan's apartment, filling the space with fragile warmth. He stood at the window holding Maya, her small head resting against his shoulder. His eyes were tired, but his voice carried quiet certainty. "They tried to break us, but here we are." The weight of betrayal still lingered, but in this moment, it no longer defined him. Tessa entered, carrying a cup of coffee, her presence calm and steady. She smiled faintly, saying nothing, but her gaze told him she saw the change in him. Ethan's chest rose with a shaky breath, his hand brushing gently across Maya's back. For the first time, he felt not just burden, but belonging. Later that day, Ethan walked through the park, the air crisp and filled with the sound of children playing. Maya stirred in his arms, her wide eyes watching the world for the first time. He whispered, "You're free from their lies, little one." A woman on a bench glanced at him, recognition flashing across her face, but Ethan ignored the weight of judgment. For once, he didn't care about whispers or stares. Each step felt like defiance, a quiet victory against the voices that said he couldn't do this. The leaves rustled overhead, and with every breath he felt the storm of the past weeks fade, leaving only the fragile hope of what could come. That evening, Ethan sat at the table across from Laura. The air between them was heavy, but not hostile. She spoke softly, her voice raw. "I can't take back what I did, but I'll stand beside you if you let me." Ethan's hands tightened around his glass, then loosened as he exhaled. "If you love her, then you'll be here, not hiding behind lies." Laura's tears shimmered as she nodded, her walls finally breaking. Maya gurgled softly from her seat, unaware of the fragile truce forming around her. Ethan's heart still carried scars, but he knew this moment was the first step towards something better. Night fell, and Ethan sat alone in the quiet of his living room, Maya asleep in the crib beside him. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the echoes of the courtroom, the betrayals, the tears all still within him. Yet the silence was no longer hollow. It was full. He whispered into the stillness, "I thought I was broken, but maybe she was sent to fix me." His eyes glistened, his voice cracking, but his body carried a steadiness he had never known. He reached into the crib, brushing Maya's tiny hand with his finger, and for the first time in years, he smiled without forcing it. The story closed with Ethan cradling Maya at the window, the city lights glowing against the night sky. His whisper carried the weight of every scar and every vow. "They tried to take everything from me, but you'll always know who I am." His eyes filled with tears that fell freely, no longer hidden. The silence that followed was not empty but final. A line etched in stone. His past had broken him, but this child gave him something unshakable: purpose. The night pressed against the glass, but inside the apartment was light, fragile yet enduring. And as Maya stirred in his arms, Ethan knew the world would never again take away what had been claimed in this moment.